Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Gwen Gosney. I work for TCTA, but I'm also a council member, the past president of LaRSSA. So my two worlds are colliding over here today during this web chat. We are going to take a few moments just to wait for other people who've registered to enter the room. We've got well over 100 registrations today, so let's see how many people are going to be pitching up in the next few minutes. We look forward to chatting to you soon. Wow, I see greetings from Peru and all over the rest of South Africa. Welcome, guys. It's really nice to have you all in the room. We're just waiting to see if more participants actually join our meeting before we just start. I see we've got 37 people in at the moment, but well over 100 registrations. Richard is ready and waiting to entertain us this afternoon, but we're just giving it another moment or two. Maybe just as we're waiting, a little bit of background as to how this web chat came about. LaRSSA has been doing web chats to try and contextualize land rehabilitation in what we're doing. It's a very diverse field. It's a multidisciplinary space. And you can't really be a professional just at land rehabilitation because it takes engineers, it takes environmentalists, it takes a whole diversity of skills. It's wonderful to see so many of our regular members sponsors and just friends in the room already. So thank you for joining us today. I'm not sure how many of you are joining us for Friday's expedition down to the Vaal barrage to go and have a look from the water, to have a look at some of the wetlands rehabilitation that is taking place up in that area, have a look at the state of the Vaal and how it is really influencing life up here in Gauteng. Those wetlands are critical, and as LaRSSA grows and expands our offering around land rehabilitation, wetlands is a very big part of what we're looking to rehabilitate in the landscape. So wetlands obviously very important to water security in South Africa, but we have discovered in just in my work and in everyday engagements with other people, how few people realize how this whole Vaal River system and the water supply to Gauteng works. It's a very strange system. People imagine that rain falls, it goes into the dam and comes out your tap. It's not quite how it works, and today Richard's going to give us a bit of an overview and an introduction to that system and what's happening in it at the moment, which is quite interesting. We'll talk about the shutdown of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project tunnel. Just in case you're expecting a small pipeline, there is an image at the top of the page here up next to Richard's image of the size and scale of that pipeline that we're talking about. So, Richard, I see we've got about 40 people in the room now. We've given everybody a few minutes. So just from my side, a big welcome. Let's do this. A big welcome to everybody. Just to say thank you very much for joining us today. And Richard, I'm going to hand over to you.
Okay, my mic is on. Okay, thanks very much, Gwen. Okay, you've taken that slide off. I was going to say, I'm not going to put my camera on because the image that you would see will be totally different to that one there. You would actually see the true me. And the true me is not a tie and a shirt, to put it mildly. Okay, just to, I think it's in my background. And one of the reasons of doing this, I've worked in basically in the water sector for virtually my entire life, starting in municipalities, doing basic township development. And then I did community water and supply and sanitation, which took me all over the country, and then joined base TCDA, which are the real large water resource projects. And that give me a very good overview of what happens across the entire chain. And what it takes water to get water and provide sanitation, as I would put it, to the smallest community in the farthest reaches of the Northern Cape, Richtersveld, to, let's say, the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, which basically has influence on 70 to 80% of the country, which I'll explain a little bit more as we go through. Okay, I'm going
Thanks,
to.
Richard. Thanks,
Yep.
thanks for that brief overview. I did forget to mention that you were willing to take questions during your presentation. I'm going to stop sharing now, and
Okay.
you're welcome to share. For those of you who would like to access this afterwards, remember there will be a recording. We're just waiting for you to share your screen, Richard, and then we can get started. What Richard didn't say about himself, he's a very passionate person who believes, okay, you can just go into presentation mode.
Yeah, no,
Who,
I'm just.
who believes in walking the talk. And he is the only gentleman I know in the whole of Johannesburg who has voluntarily got waterless sanitation and maintains it in his own home. So Richard really does walk the talk when it comes to sustainability and doing things the right way. That's why I love listening to what you have to say, Richard. So please, yeah, if anyone wants to sort of make a comment during the discussion, Teresa, I know you're listening. Maybe if we could just type in the chat box,
People,
or you
people can
can put up your
stick up.
hand.
They can put
Stick
up
up a
their
hand.
hands as they go through. Okay.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Richard.
Okay. You were saying walk the talk. Just don't get me on my motorbike, as it was on Friday when we were out at one of the dams I'm going to talk about. There's a very different me at that point. Okay, Integrated Vaal River System, which we're going to talk about because when you go down to the Vaal Barrage on Friday, you're on smaller thing. It's on the Vaal River. Larger thing, it's the Vaal River System. The bigger thing is called the Integrated Vaal River System. Now, this talk I'm doing it in context of what the event, which is the two events which have just occurred on in the Integrated Vaal River System. One is the exceptional rainfall that we've had, which has had a huge impact on the dams. And the second one is on the closure of the tunnel and what it has meant, or in the case of what it actually hasn't meant to anyone because no one's noticed on the tunnel. And I'm going to build the talk on that, but please feel free to ask questions to expand on that. So that's the core of it. But if you want to know something else, please just let me know. Or just ask a question. Okay, Vaal Dam. Now the Vaal Dam was starting to get really low. We had a very dry year last rainy season, and essentially from April until October, we had zero rain in the Vaal River catchment. As a result, the Vaal Dam drops quite dramatically during that period. It's actually by design, and I'll explain why it's by design. But this was a aerial photograph taken in September, and that was when the Vaal Dam was at 42%. And you can see in the On the bottom right-hand side of the picture, you can see that kind of roadway coming out into the dam to a little concrete bridge structure. And that is the intake to Randwater's Suikerbosch works. Now, if the water level drops below 18%, that works will no longer be functioning optimally and able to supply the amount of water required. And then we've got another, there's a couple of other big pump stations. There's one pump station which supplies to the Groot power station, and next door to it is the Vaal River Eastern Subsystem Augmentation Project, which takes water up to Eskom's power stations in the Secunda area, and that would cease operation as well because the water level will be too low. At that point, they can still release water from the Vaal Dam down into the actual Vaal River and abstract it. But at that point, if it falls below that level, there will be immense problems, essentially for Gauteng and anywhere supplied by water. Now, when the water level drops, we get the scare stories. Okay, first of all, the graves appear out of the water. Those graves are the original white farmers whose farms were flooded when Vaal Dam was built in 1938. And the other thing which appears is the airport. Vaal Dam was an airport. It took flying boats. Between the 1930s and the 1950s, it was a stop for the flying boats coming down from the UK. And all the structures are still there. And when the Vaal Dam gets low, they all appear. And then we get headlines like this. Shocking pictures show just how empty the Vaal is. Now, the couple of things, when you get headlines like that, and that's not a picture of Vaal Dam. Just something to be aware, because a lot of misinformation comes out, and we then spend ages trying to rectify that information because people always want to seize on the worst. This was from the previous major drought, about 2016, when that headline came out. But it's actually not Vaal Dam. You can see there's mountains in the background. And I was searching, and I'm pretty sure that's a place called Bivani River. It's not even a dam. It's Bivani River in KZN, and that's the Richards Bay coal export line as it crossed the river, and that was after a very major flood had gone down the river. So, you've got to kind of be careful on that, because people then, we all get the headlines day zero, and that headline is still actually bandied about quite frequently that Gauteng's going to hit day zero. It's not by a long. It's not even on the cards to hit day zero. What it means is that the water will be restricted because we haven't got the assurance of the level of supply. Somebody else seems to have recognized where that is. That's good, because but I said Fani Bote. It's not Vaal Dam. And then the other one, which we had on the closure of the Lesotho Highlands Water Tunnel, this was from last year, April, and a thing called The Conversation. And this was picked up very, very widely across, okay, I can see a debate going on, very, very widely in the media, that by closing the tunnel, we were going to severely impact everyone in Gauteng. Farmers were going to suffer. They were going to suffer financial losses. And this article was factually incorrect from beginning to end. For example, no farmer is entitled to draw water coming from the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. All the farmers down the Liebensberg's Vlei, which is the river which takes the water from Clarence down to Vaal Dam, can only draw existing flow. Now, the distinguisher between existing flow and when you're throwing 40 cubic meters per second down that river is a bit difficult. But when we cut the water off, the farmers couldn't say that we were depriving them of water because they weren't entitled to that flow. The other thing is Vaal Dam is a big reservoir. So in other words, if Lesotho doesn't flow, there's still water in that reservoir to serve the people while we did the maintenance. So that was kind of the context that we were in. This is what was happening to Vaal Dam. This is Department of Water and Sanitation records, and these records are available. The department, unlike the city of Joburg, makes their information available, and some of it in real time, and they don't claim that you have to be an expert to understand it. So what you can see is in the from about June, the Vaal Dam was dropping at about 1% per week on there, and then you can see the kink where it accelerated about 1.5%, and that was due to the closure of the tunnel on the 1st of October 2024. Now, this was all planned for, so we're going down that line, and there is a thing called the annual operating analysis, and in that, the department always plans on worst case scenario. So they always plan that it is not going to rain, that we are going to get a time when we could go through January and have absolutely no significant rain whatsoever, which we nearly did. So they'd actually predicted it, and they've got operating rules in place, and those operating rules were set that if something didn't happen, we would release water from a place called Sterkfontein Dam. And in a couple of slides, I'm going to explain that a little bit further. But you can see what happened. We got to, in November, we had a little bit of rain, which kept the dam level for a week or so. Then it started dropping again at the same rate. And then we got to December, and then it kind of flattened off for a bit, dropped a little bit, and then it went through the roof. Literally, it went from 23% to 61% in under 2 weeks. And that's the graph of, it's a more detailed graph of what I've just shown you on the dam. You can see on the 3rd of January, that was our lowest point, it was about 23.5%. And on the 20th, it was started to 19th, which is roughly 2 weeks, it had gone up to 61%. Okay, and that was it wasn't, no one could predict this. They've been talking about La Nina, which had been quite weak, in fact. But it meant that what was going to happen, which was to do a release from Sterkfontein Dam, didn't happen. Now you can see we were down here at about approximately 23.5%. At 21%, if it had not rained, which was about a week and a half, the department would have commenced with the release from Sterkfontein Dam. Now, they don't wait until it's a minimum operating level of 18%. And there's 2 reasons. One, they can't just release the full amount right at the beginning, which is 70 cubic meters per second, because it will just cause enormous damage if they do. They've got to wet the river, so let the river absorb our water. And then there's obviously the time it takes for the water to flow from essentially Harrismith to Vaal Dam. So that's why they commenced the release early. It was put in the press that the release would only happen at 18%, and as part of the discussions, and we were going, do we contradict the minister? No, we're just not going to tell the minister what's going on. We're just going to do it, because it's quite an art, and obviously we cannot drop below 18% in Vaal Dam because of the need to supply round water. And that's what happened. That is Grootdraai Dam, which is in the Vaal catchment above Vaal Dam. So this dam supplies the power stations in the and Sasol at Secunda. So that dam was actually quite full of water, and there's a reason we keep the water. We want to keep the water in the Vaal catchment, in the upper Vaal, to serve those power stations, which obviously are a strategic asset for South Africa. So when the rains started, and go to the next one. So you can see what happened here. There on the 3rd, you can see very little was happening. So for the first 3 days, that was Grootdraai Dam filling up, because this is a hydrograph on the actual dam itself. And then the dam got full, and we went essentially from virtually zero, and that's not the total peak because there was what was going over the spillway as well, to 1,200 cubic meters per second. Okay, and the dam climbed to about 115% full. Okay, so that water, we know we've got as much as we can in the upper catchment. We now release it on its way to Vaal Dam, and that was that flow was the one which filled up Vaal Dam to the level you see at present. Okay, now this is probably I'm going to try and enlarge it as much as I can. This is well, let me start. Who always does that? Okay, Integrated Vaal River System. Let's explain it a little bit further. That is basically managing the whole system from the confluence of the Vaal and the Orange at Douglas, which is right down here, okay, all the way up in the catchment to east of Ermelo, okay, a watershed which runs through Johannesburg. But this system gets highly complicated because water comes in, water goes out. So to support the system, we bring water in from some of the water is actually taken across it and supports the power stations up here in Mpumalanga. So the first one where we take water in is from the dams. There's a place called Amsterdam, which is just here on the Swaziland border. And my sister said, "You're going to Amsterdam, so why aren't you coming to visit us?" And I'm going, "Not that Amsterdam." Okay, there's 3 dams here, Jericho Dam, West 2 Dam, and Morgenstone Dam on the Lesotho. Those tributaries of the Lesotho, and there's dams there, and those are supporting the power station. So there's a power station called Camden, which is next to Ermelo, and there's another load of power stations, which is like Kriel, Matla, Hendrina, Duva, Tutuka. Now, because they're power stations and because they're so strategic, they can also get water directly out of the Vaal River system. Hence, this area is regarded as part of the Integrated Vaal River System because you manage the entire water system together with the Vaal River system. We then got Haysop Dam. Haysop Dam, it can actually send its water to Jericho and to be pumped there, and also it can pump into the Vaal River, send it down to Grootdraai Dam. Okay, we also have Zyhoek Dam. Zyhoek's on the Tugela River, the Buffalo, which is a tributary of the Tugela. That dam supports Majuba Power Station, which is next to, close to Amersfoort. And that water can also go into the Vaal River and support Grootdraai Dam. So you can see all of this whole, and there, and then we've got what we call the Komati system, which feeds also back to these power stations. So that whole area there is called the Vaal River Eastern Subsystem, and is predominantly there to supply the power stations and the Sasol and the associated collieries. Okay, so it's run as an integrated system, hence it becomes part of the Integrated Vaal River System. We move south down the Drakensberg and we get to the Tugela Vaal transfer scheme on that. Now, that is where we take water from the Tugela River and pump it 580 meters over the Drakensberg Mountains into Sterkfontein Dam, which is, if anyone's driven that between Harrismith down to Bergville, you go right past that dam. And if you stand on top of Olieshoek Pass, where you can look down into KZN, you can see all the dams below you. And underneath you at that point, there is a power station. Drakensberg Power Station, 1,000 megawatt power station. And it's a pump storage scheme. So it's there for Eskom to generate power during peaks, but because they're reversing the turbines to pump it to the upper pond, they can, when we release water from Sterkfontein Dam, replenish that water by pumping over a dam into the main dam. If we do organise tours to that place, so but it's very interesting on that, because now most people are completely unaware when they're standing on the pass what is up beneath their feet. But there's a big but with that water. It is expensive because you're pumping using electricity. Currently, with Eskom, there's called a sweetheart deal, where the department only pays the cost of coal for pumping the water through the Drakensberg power station. But we conservatively estimate and that was quite a few years ago we did that estimate, even at R1 a cubic meter, there's 2.6 billion rands worth of water sitting in Sterkfontein Dam. So it's not cheap. And that's the reason why in the operating rules for the Vaal River system, this water is only released when it's absolutely necessary. Now, the reason you don't release it earlier, Vaal Dam, you can see from the earlier picture, is actually it's a shallow dam. It's got a huge surface area, and the evaporation of it, because of where it's situated, is high. So on a hot, windy day, you're losing 12 millimeters. I've seen the record 12 millimeters evaporation over the entire surface area. So the water coming in from Lesotho Highlands is actually only replenishing the evaporation. It's so much. So what they do is they keep the water here in Sterkfontein Dam. It's a very deep dam. It's 88 meters a dam, and it is cold. I can promise you that because I've been windsurfing on it, I've fallen in it, and it is very cold. So the evaporation is far less. So we keep the water here. Then also the reason for keeping the water here and only releasing it when we absolutely have to is because if we have to replenish the water there, it's going to cost money. Now, because you can see the Wilke River coming down here, when you release water, and particularly if it hasn't rained, the water is going to fill up the bed of the river. It's going to fill up all the wetlands which are in that river. It's going to absorb an enormous amount of water. So when we do a release, the last releases I've seen, the minimum is 7% of the volume of Sterkfontein Dam. And 7% of the volume of Sterkfontein Dam to replace at current day prices is probably over 200 million rand. So it provides assurance. People say it's an insurance policy, but it's part of the normal storage capacity of the Vaal River system. But in terms of the operating, because of the cost, because of the evaporation of Vaal Dam, we keep the water there until we need it. Okay, then we move across to the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. Katse Dam, Mahali Dam, and Potahadi Dam, which is being currently under construction at the moment. Okay, these dams here, now this works differently. The water here flows on a continuous basis unless we shut the tunnel down. And the reason for that is that as that water flows out of Lesotho, it generates hydropower for Lesotho, and they can meet a lot of the electricity needs from the Lesotho Highlands project. And what they're looking at is, with the increased volumes coming through, they will be able to run 3 generators on continuous basis, and that will save us about 72 megawatts that they'll be able to generate, and that's then 72 megawatts which they wouldn't be looking for South Africa to provide. Okay, it's not a big amount in terms of South Africa's total power demand. It's not even one generator in one of the new power stations. There's each of those generators is over 700 megawatts now, but it's still, it's better that they generate power instead of them taking power. And the big thing to realize is that the original scheme, if we had not had this scheme where we gravitate water into South Africa, we could have come down here where the Senku becomes the Orange River, where it crosses the border. We could have put a dam there, we could have collected the water there, and we could have pumped it all the way back to here at enormous cost. Now that, if people might have seen it, there's a thing called, it's termed royalties, but it's actually a share of the cost saving by constructing this scheme in Lesotho instead of constructing this scheme in South Africa. So we pay, it's about 1.5 billion rand now a year to Lesotho for having built this scheme here and saved money. A lot of people don't like it, but that's the agreement we came to in 1986 with Lesotho. It's an international agreement, and if you want to break an international agreement, as one certain American president seems to be doing at the moment, you can have your order fall apart. And the problem is that money actually is a major support to Lesotho. But just give you an idea, now that was where South Africa actually compensates Lesotho. It's quite interesting because most of the money ends up in the lowlands, and the people in the highlands actually do complain that they haven't seen so much benefit, but there's a lot of roads and everything gone in there. But when we come to Woodstock Dam, which is wholly in South Africa, there's no compensation. There was very little compensation to the people here. They will tell you when you go there that they were kicked off the land. So it was all tribal land in KwaZulu at that space. But as you know, the homelands and South Africa, it was, how can I say, it didn't make much difference. If Dwyer wanted to take that land in the homelands, they did. They were moved off, and people watch the water flowing past in a canal to Gauteng, and they don't have access to the water, and it has caused problems. Recently, the community refused to let the department pump water to replenish in Sterkfontein Dam, so that, things had to be put in place. Just to put it in context, because when Woodstock was built in the 70s, there was none of the, you could just literally kick people off land. EIAs didn't exist. You could drown people's graves, all sorts of things which you cannot do any longer. Okay, so that's the integrated Vaal River system. That's the water coming in. Then obviously the water goes out. So we take water from the Vaal River system into the Komati Olifant system. It's going to the power stations, dedicated, but it's actually gone into another catchment. At Vaal Dam, Rand Water takes water, and Rand Water is the biggest interbasin transfer scheme in the country because it lifts water up to the Witwatersrand Ridge, and then once it's north of that ridge, it is going into the Crocodile River catchment, and that's going there because it's going through people's houses and comes out as a lot of it comes out as wastewater. So what happens on the south of the ridge, the water comes back and you're going down to the Vaal barrage. So you've got the Riet, the Klip, and the Suikerbosch River come back into the Vaal River down to Vaal barrage. Now there's a lot of management here just above the confluence of the Suikerbosch and the Vaal. There's a weir called Letabo Weir. Now they release water from Vaal Dam down to the Letabo Weir, and then it's taken for Rand Water has got another treatment works at Vereeniging, so it's about there. Letabo Power Station, water goes to Sasolburg, but they let the absolute minimum amount of water past Letabo Weir. It's about 1.5 cubic meters, if that, because the flow in the river is in the Vaal River is actually the return flows and any natural flows from those rivers. The majority of it, especially in the winter season, is wastewater on the Vaal, which is why the Vaal barrage is so polluted, because it's getting all the crap coming out of Joburg. In the same way that Hardeperspoort Dam, which is there, gets so polluted on the northern side, because it's collecting all the crap from Pretoria and Johannesburg, Mogale City, Ekurhuleni, etc. on that. Then your water flows down the Vaal River. You've got Midvaal water taking to the Klerksdorp, Orkney area. They have to treat that. They have to pay a lot more for treatment because of the appalling quality water that we send down to them. And then the water comes down to Bloemhof Dam and goes into the Vaalharts irrigation scheme. So the water is constantly used on the way down. Oh yeah, and then it's no longer Steadybank, it's Vaal Central taking the water, and it was originally taking it because of the gold fields, which are almost defunct now around Vaal. Okay, so that's the integrated Vaal River System as it works, and the Vaal Dam is literally the you can call it the bottleneck. It's like the center of the hourglass. All the water comes in, it comes to that part, it gets all taken out, and then immediately downstream, that's where it starts coming back in again. Now, when we had the rains on there, and why we have such a big system, what we could see was the rains came in from the Indian Ocean, and they came in a very narrow band. So we saw Zyhoek Dam went up to 100%. Haysock Dam went up to 100%. Grootdry Dam, as you saw from the video, went up to 100%. We got a lot of water in this area, but at the same time, we saw these 3 dams barely shifted. So the water actually didn't hit that catchment, not that rainstorm which hit there. We also saw, we saw water coming down the Wilge River. We saw a flow of up to about 150 cubic meters per second, but that's tiny compared to what was coming down here. Standerton, about here where Villiers is, where the N3 crosses the Vaal River. The peak flow was nearly 2,000 cubic meters per second on that coming into Vaal Dam compared to 150 here. So there was rain here, but not the significant rainstorms that which were filling. But essentially, that's how the system works. So because you've got more areas that contribute, you've got more chance that you're going to get heavy rainfall somewhere over this catchment, which will fill up Vaal Dam. And then we come down to Lesotho. At the moment, Mogale Dam is at 100%. They actually filled that dam up before they closed the tunnel because the water level in Mogale is higher than Katsay. But Katsay the water level has been increasing slowly, but very slowly. So there's been no significant rain in this catchment either. But essentially what you're seeing, we have we have one catchment here, two there, three, 4, 5 catchments, which can contribute to the water in the Vaal River system. And if you compare this with somewhere like Cape Town, where Cape Town has essentially one catchment serving all its dams. So if it doesn't rain in that catchment, they're stuffed. And that is what we frequently see in Cape Town when there's no rain, or the rain decides to come in from a different direction, and they have restrictions far more frequently than we do on the integrated Vaal River system, because of that advantage. We're targeting kind of different areas, and all this area is part of our high rainfall areas where the most of our precipitation in the country falls on that very small area. Okay, on that. And that's the other reason why they're looking that we should start protecting these areas. And this argument about having, I mean, they want to do coal mining in the Zyhook catchment area. And you've got to look at, and the country's got to balance. Does it want a coal mine, which basically only functions for, most of them are 40 to 50 years, if that, completely wreck the environment? And once you've wrecked that environment, you've wrecked it. You're not, but you want that water for the next 1,000 years. So which one is more important? And it's still a big argument. I mean, people, want to mine these areas. And we were having discussion earlier on Nkomazi project on protecting the catchments, and asked, why don't we buy out the catchments? And you can go back to Victorian times in New York, Catskills Mountains. New York City bought the catchment. And they bought the catchment because they wanted to protect their water source. Glasgow bought the area around Loch Katrine, and they were remarkably, the engineer there was very clever, because he raised the level of the water in the loch by 1.5 meters, so they could gravitate the water into Glasgow, okay, instead of pumping it. Which, apart from saving on energy, you haven't got any pressure pipelines, or your pressure is quite low in comparison. And by buying out the catchment, they didn't do any water treatment whatsoever. It's only recently they've put water treatment in, because they're now recognizing other things, but people survived 150 years. And as I said, Glasgow got away with blue murder, and New York as well, for 150 years because of that. Here, we pump every drop up to Johannesburg. And when you pump, you've got pressure pipelines, you need electricity, all sorts of other things. You don't get away with blue murder, because especially with electricity, the moment electricity stops, your pumps stop, you have no water. And we've experienced that. And it doesn't help that we live in an area that some of the highest number of recorded lightning strikes, or high areas of lightning strikes, is the Mpumalanga Highveld. Okay, and then second highest is this area here. So we're very prone to lightning strikes, and lightning strikes, they very easily trip equipment, and it's designed to do that, to protect themselves. But when it trips equipment, you just don't throw the switches like you do in your house to restart them. There's a protocol you've got to follow. So you can be out for 3-4 hours while they reset the equipment. That means no water is coming through. And we have actually seen the problem in Joburg, where the system was running at the limits, because people won't limit, not people, the whole system, too much demand from non-revenue water, watering of gardens, water of swimming pools, etc. And when you've got a system which is such limits, the moment you have an interruption, it causes considerable problems, because Water is not like electricity, that when you restart electricity, the whole system goes live. Water takes a long time to get the air out of the pipe, and it's particularly from high-lying areas, it can take ages to get your water back. So it's a very sensitive system that on that. Okay, so that's the integrated Vaal River system. As I say, you're going to see a tiny little bit of it down here. And the big problem we have in the Vaal barrage is there's three problems. Okay, there is general litter, which gets into the stormwater system. Taryn Johnson on Henop's Revival loves showing the pictures of the poly islands that appear in the Henop's River, which is that's just rubbish. That's not even out of the sewage treatment works. Plastic bottles, etc. Plastic bottles, one of the worst things for floating along and getting into the system. They come down here as well. You've got oil off the roads will get in there. You have then sewage treatment works which don't work, and you must have heard of it in Fellaini. Most of the sewage treatment works are inoperative, and the other problem in that area, they have lots and lots of pump stations, and they don't work either. So the water, the sewage doesn't even get in to the works. It doesn't even have even if the works isn't really functioning, if it's going through it, it actually has a retention time. It does some treatment. In the case of Fellaini, a lot of the sewage doesn't get there. And then obviously in Ekurhuleni, anything south of the Witwatersrand Ridge, where we get overflowing sewers, then that's going into the rivers, into the Vaal barrage. And just a point on overflowing sewers, because I work quite closely with Joburg Water, we see a complete disconnect between people flushing their toilet, and they will watch a manhole, and I've seen it, a manhole spurting sewage half a meter up in the air, and they won't even report it. So they'll complain about the state of our waterways, but they won't even give Joburg Water the chance to fix their sewers or to clean out their sewers. And then the other problem which we have on sewers in particular is they're the most anonymous place underneath the sun. People lift the manhole lids and drop everything you could think of down them. And we had recently a case in Norwood on the Orange Grove Sprite, because I worked down there with some of the communities. We were seeing sewage in the stream, and I've taught people, how to work upstream as far as possible. We eventually, the one person found the manhole out of which the sewage was coming, and unfortunately, it was on the main outfall sewer, which in that case actually runs underneath the concrete channel of the Orange Grove Sprite. So the water, the sewage was going directly into the Sprite. And eventually, when they came out, they couldn't clean it. They brought out the jetting trucks, and eventually they found the dead body. And that dead body had probably caused a main sewer to discharge sewage into the environment for probably about 5 days on that. So a lot of the problems, as I say, and in Cape Town, they pull out skins. I was maintaining a township in Northwest, and we were cleaning the sewers on a regular basis. And what they say is when the police coming knocking at your front door and you've got stolen goods, you flush them down the toilet. And then the sewer workers, every time we clean silt, they would go at it, and they were doing quite a nice trade on recovering stuff, coins, rings, chains, stuff like that, which had gone down the sewers. Just something else. What else can go down the sewer? And that wasn't even intentional. I was working down in Vaal Dam, and we were having a major problem with a blockage in the sewer coming out of the township next to Virginia, which is Melading. So go in there to find out what's going on, and we hauled out a 10-meter long rope of knickers and bras from the sewer. And what that was that people were washing, they were washing their clothes in a bucket, in a tub, and then when they poured it down they would pour it down the gully. So what they would do to make sure it went down, they would lift the grating of the gully off, and as they poured it down, the flimsies, the knickers and bras would go down. And all it took was one bra with the hooks to get caught on something. And then as the next one went past, they got caught. And eventually, and that wasn't even a deliberate act. That was totally unintentional. But it caused huge problems, caused blockages, overflow into our river system. Okay, so that gives you an idea of, say, when you're down at Vaal Barrage, and you're on the water, you'll be actually floating on that on the Vaal Barrage. Okay, can I just get to the next one? Right. Okay. This, just to show you, this is data from the department. They update the state of the dams on a weekly basis. They cover all the major dams in the country. So if you're down in Cape Town, you can see it. If you're down in KZN, you can see it. What's happening in your dams. And as I was saying, you can see on this week, well, this was actually last week because on that, but it was 103% Groot dry. Hay soap, which as I said is supporting Groot dry, is 100%. So from Eskom's point of view, they're very happy now. You can see Katsay, it's 78. So we haven't, you can see there hasn't been significant rain in the Katsay Dam catchment to fill it up. Mahali 102, but that was like that even at the start of the close down. And then Vaal Dam 61. And you can see how West 2, which was those dams, that was a significant climb last week on that. So it is, and then you can see even the Woodstock Dam is only 86.3. It hasn't, I don't know why it actually went down 4%. They must have released water for some reason. But it is, but that's on the Tugela catchment. So there hasn't been significant rain in the Tugela catchment. Otherwise, that would have been full at 100% as well. And then that Zyhook one on another tributary of the Tugela is at 100%. And you can see the previous week it was actually spilling. It was so full. Okay, if anyone wants to see this information, it is readily available on the department's website there. And you don't have to be an expert to get it, which Joburg Water weren't even allowing people to see the levels of their reservoirs, which would help because if you knew your reservoir was running low, you might actually save water in your area or even shout at your neighbour when they're washing down using their hose pipe and you're just about to run out of water. So the reality is in our municipalities, they really keep you ignorant. Cape Town was a lot better during their drought. But the department is very good. And this one, I was actually watching in real time as the Vaal Dam filled up. And it was quite interesting. We were making guesses as to which day it would get to 50%, which day it would get to 60%. And it was a bit of fun, but because no one's actually going to make a decision on it, the department doesn't make decisions on daily changes. But you could actually see how the system was reacting to the rains on that. Okay, go to the closure of the tunnel. The as I say, we had that picture all doom and gloom, which was put out. And the reality is only one town has had any problems, and that's Clarence, because Clarence was taking water directly from the tunnel. They had a dam there, but the dam had only got 1 month's supply. They were told well in advance that they had to up their, make sure that their system was working properly, and they didn't. So Clarence hasn't yet run out of water, but it's at one stage they got down to 3% in their dam. It's very close. But the rest of it, next to Bethlehem, there is a dam called Salzport Dam. That dam is always full because it's on the Liebenberg's River. So the water from the Lesotho Highlands Water Project flows down the Liebenberg flow, and it keeps that dam at 100% full the entire time. So when the tunnel was closed, that dam was at 100%. The municipality did put in restrictions. In fact, they're having to put in restrictions previously because they were having problems with their own distribution system. But they did put restrictions in a month in advance of the tunnel closed down. And this is the level of the dam. So you can see that the orange line is what the department said it would do if there was no rain. So we would drop, we would then release for 5 days, stop, let it drop. And the reason it's dropping is because Bethlehem itself takes water out of the Salzport Dam. So that's one of the main reasons for the drop. And this release would have been for the towns downstream of the dam, which was Twirling, Reitz, and Frankfurt. But so they planned for that. So that's kind of the worst case scenario that they were planning for, that would make us last for 6 months. So what happened? You can see it dropped in October. We got rain in the Liebenberg's catchment above the dam. The dam level went up, and then you can see it started tracking down again, same rate as before. Then in middle of November, it flattened again when we had rain. So you can see the rainfall events clearly here. Then it starts tracking down again. And then since about the middle of December, we've had sufficient rain in the catchment to maintain that level. Even if it stopped raining tomorrow, the Salzport Dam could support everyone for the remainder of the shutdown. And it's so full. I mean, there are problems in the Lesotho side is running a little bit behindhand, and they will obviously make a decision whether to keep it closed for a little bit longer, or to reopen. But it's not. They're not going to be forced to reopen that tunnel to support the towns which are dependent on flow on the Liebenberg's River, because you've got sufficient water in the dam. And that shows you what's going on. And the fact is, the farmers are always dependent on what should only be taking what is the actual flow in the river without the Lesotho Highlands. So if there's no water in that river because it hasn't rained, they are not suffering any losses because of what the Department of Water and Sanitation has done. Okay, that's it. Any questions? Clarity? And any further debate on where that picture of Vaal Dam was? Because I saw Fanny Burt, I saw various suggestions of where it might be. Gwen?
Thank you so much, Richard. Yeah, it's nice to see the map. I think that's the value of having this conversation today, reaching a few more people than we would have if we were sitting on the boat. And I think it's really nice to have a very graphic presentation of just how connected our systems are, where the water comes from and where it's going to. I think, the more people who can be exposed to this information, the better it is. It just gives us peace of mind. But I think the one thing that really comes through for me very strongly, there's two things that come through very strongly for me in your presentation. So number one is that the way we act within our catchments, our water use behaviors are exceptionally important, makes a huge difference to what is being used. If you go into environmental legislation, there's this thing called the polluter pays principle. And if we're looking at the environmental costs of building new dams and water infrastructure projects and transfer projects, it really comes down to how do we better manage the value that we get out of the water when we're using it? Are we wasting water in our towns and cities and in our industries? I think that's a very important element, but also highlighting the absolute importance of having healthy ecological infrastructure, that our catchments and our strategic water source areas are effectively protected, that wetlands and the other ecological infrastructure within those catchments are rehabilitated, are looked after and reinstated to make sure that they act as the sponges that feed our wetlands. I just want to have a look. Just a show of hands. Anyone here? I can't see everybody. I might need a bit of help here from Teresa. Can we just get a show of hands or something just to see how many of the people in the room are actually going to be on the tour tomorrow? Yeah, I know I will be, so I'm going to raise my hand. Anyone else going to be on the Vaal Dam outing tomorrow? Not sure. I actually can't see. If you are, please do. Oh, sorry, it's not tomorrow. It's on Friday. That's probably half the problem. On the 31st, Friday the 31st. Richard, if you don't mind, you can stop sharing. I just want to share people a few images that I put together while you were talking, just to give some context to what it is that we were saying as well. And here we go. Oops. I have to share my screen. All right, so big thanks to Richard, but also just to everybody in the room. Go through these. This is the tunnel at the Ash River Outfall near Clarence. You can go and visit that site at any point. You won't be able to go into the tunnel because this is where the water passes through, but there is a lovely viewpoint where you can go and have a look at a model that shows you the scale of that actual tunnel that is coming through, bringing the water from Lesotho. It makes a very entertaining stop. At this particular time, it is closed because of the shutdown, but if you are ever in the Clarence area, it is a very good spot to visit. The team that are working there, we've just got our water use license issued. So in the time remaining for the shutdown, they're going to be able to do priority works for the stabilization and rehabilitation of the water course that transfers the water further down the system in that Liebenberg's flare down towards Bethlehem. As you can imagine, this volume of water coming down through the tunnel is it changes the flow dynamics in the system greatly. So obviously every 5 years or so when we do the infrastructure shutdown, it provides an opportunity to have a look at what's happening below the high water mark and see how that river can be best rehabilitated and maintained. This is what we call an adit. It's effectively the access point that allows you to go into or access the tunnel through the mountains. And then within the tunnel, there's a very awkward workspace, but obviously having a look at some of the degradation and the work that has to be repaired to make sure that this infrastructure is effectively maintained. This is just a picture of the Henops River with some of its trash. You can have a look at the water quality. It's not particularly good, but just it's a very graphic reminder of the fact that there's a lot coming down through our water systems that is affected by the pollution. I think it's this particular river has got 3 wastewater treatment plants. We've heard about the issues around those wastewater treatment plants, but if you're wondering why the Henops River in Centurion is a problem, there's 3 wastewater treatment plants that feed upstream of this dam, and it really does get quite messy. There's just some examples of the cleanup work that's being done by Taryn's project. just to give people a bit more perspective. But thank you so much for listening and sharing the time with us today. If there are any other questions or comments, doesn't have to be about the Vaal system specifically. You have access to Richard, and he's very knowledgeable about all of these things. And yeah, he's also got a passion for how we manage and rehabilitate some of the urban infrastructure around our roads. If any of you were at our Paris conference a couple of years ago, you would also have met Richard potentially have met Richard in one of the St. Ursina presentations, which he spoke about the rehabilitation of our urban waterways. So yeah, I know there are some of you in the room who have a great interest in the subject matter of urban rehabilitation and watercourse management of runoff and drainage. Please feel free to chat to Richard at any time about these things as well. Yeah, this is the last chance that one really has to register if you would like to join us. Prof. Anya du Plessis and Donnie Otto, who's our incoming president, once Conrad's finished as the LaRSSA president. They're going to be taking us down the Vaal River. I think so far we've got about 34, 35 people joining us, and we look forward to exploring the system and having a look at the wetlands and the rehabilitation that's happening up there. All right, open to the floor. Anyone else? Great. All right. Thank you so much for everybody who made time to come and learn a little bit more about the system. And if you would like some more information, please do let us know. And yeah, thank you very much for sharing this with us. It was most refreshing. Thank you, Richard.
Okay, thanks.